this video, I will be creating a contact form that is using Node.js and Express. And when you submit the form, it will send that information to a Gmail account. Now, in this video, I'm hoping to keep it more beginner friendly. My experience working in IT, we all learn differently, understand concepts different ways. Some of us learn by doing, some of us are visual, some of us get it just by reading documentation. There's a lot of information, there's too little information. So I just wanted to share my experience kind of working with the backend development. So it's for anyone in dev, but it's also for myself because I'm always learning. So as mentioned, it's going to be more backend. I'll have a part 2 for the front end side of it, but let's make sure it's working before making it pretty. And let's go ahead and get started. Although I said I'm keeping this beginner friendly, I am not going to go through setting up the dev environment. I feel there is great tutorials on setting up Node and any other prerequisites that you would need. But I am using Visual Studio Code for my text editor, and I'll be using Git Bash just to kind of set up the project directory. However you like to set up your project is up to you, but I like trying different ways and just learning. I like the terminal, so if you want to use your text editor to, set up the project, that's fine as well. I'm going to say something simple. And of course, naming conventions matter. Things should make sense. And then I'm just going to, of course, create my files. I might not use the index.html file in this video. It'll probably be a landing page for front end, but I'm just creating it now and then going to go into the project. All right, so the next thing that we want to do is installing our Node packages, and I'll be using the terminal within text editor to do so. Use a different text editor, whatever fits your preference, that's fine. So the first thing that I want to do is just initialize a project with npm init, and I'll keep the defaults there. And of course, that creates our package.json, which tells, our app what packages it depends on, and then we want to install those packages with npm I, and I'm going to install Express, body parser, path, and .env. I need to turn the light on. And I'll do my best to try to explain what these packages mean, like what they're for. So now we're going to go into the server.js so we can start setting up the server and start setting up the app. So now we need to require the packages that we just installed. And if you've watched other videos or read other documentation, then you may see that instead of saying const, that var is being used or let is being used. And from my understanding, you want to use const or let in these situations, that it's not good to use var when requiring your package modules. You just want to keep it consistent there. env. And of course, you could just like copy and paste these lines of code. It's easier for you. And I like how Visual Studio Code pretty much tells you kind of like suggestions, or like tells you like things about what you're doing, how it says, I'm creating an Express app, and it's being referenced as app. So, this is just our middleware for us to tell the app like where to go and where to send data, things like that. And I feel like if you go to Express and go to their documentation, I feel they do a really great job with explaining things that you're using with this middleware. You know, they even tell you how to set it up, and then of course they go through like all your routing and just I feel like it's useful to look at the documentation and kind of understand it. So now that we have that, I'm going to just also create our port and make sure that we can to um, listen to it and that it's running. So pretty much I created a port and we're using that environment. That environment pretty much that means that you are hiding when you're using environment variables, you are pretty much wanting to kind of hide sensitive information like email address. We can store like information like credentials, and our code can reference those credentials, but they won't like get pushed to the front end of the app or get exposed. So how this is written, this port, I didn't have to say process.env. I could have left it at 3000. But if I put this project, you know, on somebody else's server and say they're not using 3000, then it's just going to default to a different port so that it can run. So I'm just going to um, then go into, I use the Express documentation and behind me, and it's really a great reference for just setting your things up. So I'm going to just go into um, getting this to listen on the port that we just created. And then I'm going to use an arrow function to tell it to do something if it's listening to this port successfully. So I'm going to say, you are listening on port. Port. All right. So in Visual Studio Code, I do have NodeMon installed. So there's two ways to run your code. You can just do node server.js or NodeMon, and NodeMon will allow you to save your code and it will just refresh the server. So it's just gonna save you a few steps rather than using Node because you kind of have to like back out of it and restart the server every time you make an update. But I'm just gonna do Node just for now, just to see if this is running. And it is. You are listening on port 3000. So our app is running, but it's just not doing anything except for saying that it's running. So of course we want to kind of now set up, we want to set up a route, and I'm going to set up a route to the contact page where the form will live. So first, let me go ahead and create the contact page. And I mentioned that the index page that I created earlier is going to be more of a landing page, so I might not actually use that in this video just yet. And since we have the contact page created, now I'm going to go ahead and um, set up a route for us to get that page. Or if we route to that page, then did what? What does it do? So I'm going to use the methods that they have in here, which is get request. So I'm going to say app.get, and I'm going to say a route, and I'm just going to say the entry point. That's what I say for that line. And I'm going to use another arrow function, and I'm going to say request respond. Now, I always get confused with this part of the function. It's request respond parameters. It's either request respond or respond request. But now I'm going to say rs respond send and this is coming from Express, and you see that it's telling us that we can do something. So I'm going to do that option that says some HTML. So I'm going to just say hello. And I'm going to save this. And then this time I'm going to run nodemon. And then I'm going to go to the front of our app, which would be the browser, to see if I can see hello on port 3000. So we'll do localhost 3000, and then we have hello. All right, so the next thing I want to get into is creating the route to our contact form, to our contact page. And we'll be using another app.get. And this time we are going to be saying that when you are on the contact route, then you will do something, which will be what our function is for. So when we land on contact, we're going to create another arrow function. And if you use the classic way of doing functions, then that's your preference. That's fine in this video. So we'll do that. And then we are going to want Express to send us a file once we're on this contact route. So we have some methods already here, and one of them is send file. So we're going to tell it to send file, and it's going to send the contact.html, which is going to be displaying our form. Now, I don't have this actually memorized by heart. I have my own little documentation here. So I'm just going to grab this line of code and paste it into the function there, and I'm going to change the index to contact.html. So pretty much when we land on localhost 3000/contact, then it should be looking for this file, and that's why we use the path up here, is it should be looking for this file, and it will send contact.html to the front. So we first need to get a form to test it, since there's nothing in that file yet, but let's see if we can just console log something on the back and see if that works. This is the form that shows. So we're still getting a good sign there, but let's go to our local, and then let's slash contact. So we don't have anything in that file, remember, that's why it's blank, but this is the form that shows. So that means that this is working. All right, so what we want to do is we want, of course, our contact form to be displayed on the front end. So I have just an extension that just sets up all the HTML tags for me. And I grabbed an HTML form off a code pen. I was gonna manually type that out and just put that in our body tag. And I'm going to just go ahead and also take out that script tag in there. And then I'm going to set up 2 screens. Okay, and once again, definitely check out the Express documentation. But my next step is going to do an app.post. And the post is going to be for the form. So when we, submit our form, it is going to be posting to this route to do something, and once that doing something is going to be sending that form data to an email account. And if I'm not mistaken, I know there's like a condensed way to like set up your routes and everything, so I might be doing it a little longer and not keeping it simple stupid, but more than one way to do everything, and of course this is just learning, so definitely leave a comment or something if you know of that alternate way to do it. So I am saying app.post, and I'm doing contact, and then I'm just setting up my arrow function. And what I know that I need to do with my form is that post how I named it contact, my form action has to be named the same thing. So I would either need to name like app.post my handling for page, or I would just name it contact like how I named it. So I'm saying contact, and of course the method needs to be a post. So once I submit this or post it, then when it hits this, it's going to do something. So I'm going to say console.log and just create a message that your message has been sent. So we can test this out. And I'm just going to run the node mon again. Save our contact form. And then I'm going to go to /contact. We can see it. Then I'm going to send. As you can see, nothing happened just because we didn't tell it to do anything. But we have our message has been sent. Okay, so instead of actually having, just a console log there, we want to actually put the node mailer configuration in our post route. And initially, I didn't install the package, so I need to do npm I node mailer. All right, and then I need to also just go ahead and require that. And then if you go to the node mailer documentation, they actually have an example set up for us that we can use. And the example that's set up is actually using Ethereal, which is a just like a dummy SMTP service for us to test that our server can send emails out. So I'm going to copy that entire section of code and paste it into my post route. Okay. And one thing to notice is the section of code is has comments on here that are easy to follow. And I have not been leaving comments in my code so far, and that's bad practice. So please make sure that you are leaving comments so you can reference what you're doing at a later time. It is good practice to leave comments. So there will be some more comments about what I was actually doing in this app. So in our post route, I'm going to go ahead and take out the code that's requiring node mailer again, because we did that at the top. And in here, I would, definitely look up some of these functions, or if any of these lines of code don't make sense to you. But since this is just using Ethereal as the SMTP service, this is down here is where all the magic is happening, because here in the transporter is where we are just setting up the configuration for Ethereal and whatever account and password is being used. And that account is what's used to pretty much do the action. So underneath that is where we have our email headers. So that's going to be, from, to, subject, those types of things. Now, as you see, they are set up in strings where they are predefined. And normally, of course, when you set up a form and you send it, you are going to want that form data to be sent in the email, not predefined words and information. So we'll get into how to change that, but I'm just going to leave it like so. And so if we are able to send this form successfully, then we are going to get a message back with the message information. or we are going to get an error, and that's going to be logged into the terminal for us. So let's go ahead and just try this and see if it works. Okay, I need to start my server, and you can always use the up arrow to look at your previous commands instead of typing it over again. And I am going to go to the entry point, and then I'm going to go to contact, and then I'm going to go ahead and send. Okay, so we should be getting, there we go. It's just a delay there. So as you can see, it says message sent with the ID information, and then we also get to preview the email. So if we preview it, you can see that predefined text there. Of course, we would want it to say the form data, but we know that our setup is working. So of course, now we just want to configure this with actual Gmail information instead, or if you're using a different email service. So in my terminal, I'm going to go ahead and do touch env just for me to create that file. It's a .env file. And I am going to go ahead and create the variable names for these. And these can be named how you want to, but it needs to, of course, make sense. And it's also, the variable is also capitalized. So how you set that up is just a similar way of how we did the port, process.env.port. This time we're going to do process.env.gmail_email. That's how I'm going to name it. And then I'm going to do process.env.gmail_pass. That's how I want to name it. And in my env file, I am going to go ahead and say gmail_email equals, and then gmail_pass equals. And after the equal is where I will put my email at email.com, and the password would be the password. I'm going to fill in these credentials offline, even though I'm just using a whatever account. So it will be able to look at this file and grab those credentials. And of course, it has those creds to then go ahead and grab the email headers and continue to send the message. All right, so I do want to go into how we can get the form data instead of the predefined text. And what we need is we actually need to be able to parse the data that is coming from the form. So we installed this body parser that's going to parse pretty much JSON objects, because that's how the form gets sent to the server. And there's 2 lines of code that we would want to include in our app. And I'm going to grab those 2 lines of code, and that's pretty much going to read that form data and allow our server to use that data, so then it can, of course, send that data off to Gmail. So let me go ahead and grab the 2 lines of code that I need, because I don't remember it by heart, but this is going to be off of the Express documentation. Okay, so in Express, on their body parser section, towards the bottom is where I'm going to get those 2 lines of code, which is where it says parse for URL encoded in the body parser.json. Body parser.json is going to handle the JSON object of the form. And I'm going to go ahead and paste that at the top of our app, but underneath the section where we created the app. So we have that in place. So now we are able to use features of the body parser to look at our form data. So the way that we change and get text or just information from the form is we're going to use something called request.body, and that's req.body. So I'm going to just do this example on the area that says text. I'm actually just going to delete the HTML section right here. So in this area called text, I don't want it to say hello world. I want it to say the message that the person is typing in from the form. So it's not going to be a string, but I'm going to say request the body of the message. And for me to do that, I need to look at the name of that field in my form. So the name of that field is named user message. So I need to say user message at the end of body. So user underscore message. And if I wanted the name instead of the message, then I would say underscore user name because that is referencing the name field of the form. Now, when it comes to the from and the to section, normally you are going to want the from to be the email of the sender. So you would say request.body and the email section says user mail. So I'm going to say user mail. Now, one thing working with Gmail and just kind of reading and researching is I believe that it's still going to send a from as the service account up here. So if I said that my email was bob@bob.com in the form, it's going to be delivered that it's coming from my service account. It's not going to say bob@bob.com. It's going to say whatever that service account that's set up. And from what I've read, it seems like that's some reason Gmail works that way because of how secure it is, but it would be something that you should challenge yourself to see if you can get it to say the actual from of the form. And that'll be something that I can show you. So let's go ahead and see if we can test this out and see if our creds work. And again, I'm using a less secured app, so you want to make sure that that feature is toggled on. And let's see if we get any errors or if this works for us. So I'll start the server, and I'm going to use the up arrow this time to start it. And I'm going to go to our entry point. This time I'm going to type a message and see if it works. Also, one thing that I did forget to do is the to. I'm not sending this to a real account, so I need to type in a real account. Okay. Now let's see. So we did get message sent. We couldn't get a preview URL because that was tying into that ethereal setup. but let's go ahead and see if the Gmail shows up and how it shows up.
Look at that. 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 Look at that.
So we were able to see our message and we received the email. Now, if you want to use a secured email account, definitely check out just the steps on how to set up the OAuth and what other fields that you would need. In this section, you will need additional authentication values with that Gmail service. And if for some reason yours did not work using Service Gmail, just try the original way where you're entering the host and the port and if it's secure or not, true or false. So I am going to just stop the server. So also to just change up the form fields of the contact form if you need them for it to, be relevant and make sense. Now, when we sent the form, if you notice that the form or the server, it just kept, loading. It just kept circling. When we sent, and that's because we're not telling it to do something after we send the form. We need to tell it to do something, to go to a different page, to display something, etc. I'm going to respond with an end and display a message. So how I would do that would be down here in this section. Let me close this terminal. I said terminal, I meant server, stop the server. And I'm going to say res.end. Well, we might not be able to put it there actually. res.end. And then I'm going to say your message has been sent with success. So let's see how that responds when we submit the form. Awesome. So now we're actually seeing a different visual that your message has been sent, and we just don't have that, server waiting for the next request because we told it to end with this express feature here. So of course, you probably don't want to console some of this information, just modify it and take some of it out. Maybe try just different ways to set this up. If you see documentation, there's going to be different ways to, configure the transporter and the email headers. But in my next video, I'm going to definitely have comments on this file, but I'm going to be working with like the front end and working with validation.